Hey there, people of the interwebs. I've been doing this that drawing show thing for a while now. Um, you might have noticed that I was uploading with less and less regularity. Um, and honestly, that's because I was having problems kind of finding a format that I liked. I like doing the sketches. I like my birds seem to love that. But having problems just finding a format that I liked. So I'm switching things up a bit, changing things around. I'm completely and utterly ripping off one of my favorite podcasts, Geek History Lesson. I'm stealing their opening segment, the Meet Cute, which they stole from Romantic Comedy. So basically, each week I'm going to be drawing a character that I like, and then I'm going to be telling you about that character, where I met him, and why I care about that character. I sat down and I did a list of just 90 things from my childhood. And I came to the conclusion that I watched way too much TV as a kid. And B, if you're a fan of like nostalgia, stuff from the 80s and 90s, we're going to be talking a lot about that. Um, He-Man, SWAT cats, that kind of thing. Today we are going to be talking about He-Man. So thank you, and we are switching formats, and that's why I'm just doing this opening bit. So thank you, and please like, subscribe, share, enjoy the content. Hey there, people of the interwebs. My name is Brandon Noel, and I mentioned this in the recorded intro, but I'm kind of stealing this format from Geek History Lesson. They're a podcast where they talk about different character construct and pop culture, and they give you a really great history lesson each week. I am mentioned in their Starfire episode, as well as I have a brief cameo in their Robin episode that was recorded live at at NerdCon in Escondido. So go check out those episodes. I'm briefly mentioned in both, but it's a really good show. It's a really good podcast, and I am completely and utterly kind of stealing their format as far as their opening segment. And that opening segment is their Meet Cute, where you were first introduced to these characters. And today I'm going to be talking about He-Man. Now, I was born 1986. I missed a good hunk of the He-Man craze. I came late to the He-Man party, as it were. So my introduction to He-Man was actually the Dolph Lundgren movie. Now, I know a lot of people don't care for the Dolph Lundgren He-Man film. I, on the other hand, love it. It's one of the reasons why I can say I'm a Dolph Lundgren fan. I recently rewatched it. It really does hold up. Is it the best interpretation of the He-Man mythology? No. You don't get his alter ego. You don't see She-Ra. A lot of main characters are missing. You don't get some of the behind the scenes. You don't get any kind of the intrigue that you would like. And for whatever reason, 90% of the movie takes place on Earth, which is probably budgetary reasons, but it's kind of a shame because the first, I'd say, 15 minutes and the last 15 minutes of that film are just gorgeous. but the majority of it takes place in almost like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the movie, like a 1980s suburban town. And we're dealing with prom night and that kind of stuff, which honestly doesn't fit well with the rest of the He-Man universe. But as a kid, being introduced to He-Man through the Dolph Lundgren films, I was just blown away. You get to see everything I think you'd want to see in a He-Man movie, minus She-Ra and some of the, they get the basics right. Especially for a 1980s film. This was a time when comic books and cartoons weren't taken serious as subject matter. I will spend the rest of my life wondering why the Steel movie with Shaquille O'Neal, he doesn't have the actual Superman crest on his chest. I will just forever wonder why. Maybe they didn't feel it was, whatever reason, they just didn't trust the source material. And that was indicative of films of this era. They just, comic books and cartoons just were not considered all that great source material. But where the film does draw reference to or draw from is actually Jack Kirby's Fourth World. Like, there's boom tubes, there's a lot of Kirby aesthetic in that He-Man Masters of the Universe film. And Dolph Lundgren does a really good job as He-Man. The final battle, and Skeletor is legitimately terrifying in that movie. Skeletor looks terrifying. The final confrontation in that movie where Skeletor and He-Man finally fight. It's not the best fight, but they actually throw down. And I forget the exact line, but Skeletor says something to the effect of, it was always going to come down to you and me, and your villain is truly being villainous and your hero is truly being heroic. And that's kind of all you can ask for a movie that's based off of a toy line, right? I mean, you got to see your action figures live out this incredible struggle that you never would have seen otherwise. And so for that, I will defend the Dolph Lundgren He-Man film. I think it's weak in some areas, but pretty good all the way around. And to Dolph Lundgren's credit, I'm a Dolph Lundgren apologist, as it were. I will defend Dolph Lundgren whenever and wherever I can. He's one of the few actors who's played two superheroes, or multiple superheroes. I mean, he's He-Man, and then he's also the Punisher, in the later Punisher, the first Punisher film. And I again defend that first Punisher film. That was pretty good for its time. And this is getting on a tangent, but it was also like one of the first comic book movie things I ever saw, like in the movie rental store, where it said Marvel Comics on the cover, and I went, oh, this is going to be awesome. And I wasn't allowed to rent it because my uncle was was like, no, you're too young for the Punisher. So as a young boy, I wasn't allowed to watch the Dolph Lundgren Punisher film. So years later, when I bought it on DVD, it was a magical moment for me. And I was like, I had built it up way more in my head than it really was. But I will always, I will always be a Dolph Lundgren fan. And I will say that if you haven't watched it in a while, go back and watch the Dolph Lundgren He-Man Masters of the Universe, because they spent some money on that. They didn't spend as much as they could have, but they spent some money on that. And you get to see He-Man face some of his, go through basically the action figure line and fight some of his better villains. Now, yeah, I will say I'm sure the cartoon mythology is better and stronger. But I didn't watch too much of the cartoon series. I have the Christmas crossover between He-Man and She-Ra on DVD, and that is always a fun Christmas movie. Like, we're going to watch He-Man and She-Ra. Now, the reason why I wanted to do this sketch and talk about He-Man a little bit, because again, it's not something, it was always in the ether. And I know He-Man is one of those properties where it's, forgive the comparison, it's like Sonic the Hedgehog. In that you have the TV show, the comic books, the toy line, and the cinematic film, all four of which contradict each other. I know the continuity of the TV show is very different from what we see on the back of the toy boxes, and I know that is very different from what we saw in the live action film. And it becomes frustrating for fans like me, because I'm a big fan of the live action movie. Gets frustrating. Oh, and the Marvel comics were also different, because there was never like a Bible created for the universe. So you had the Marvel Comics line that was completely different from the cartoon, which was completely different from everything else. And so you get segmented fandom, where there's a group of fans who are bigger fans of the movie or bigger fans of the comic book, the Marvel Comics, which I have a couple actually, and they're not bad. But you get a segmented fandom, whereas like say, I was going to say Star Wars, but that's a little segmented with the expanded universe. But where a good hunk of fandom, like let's say you're a Marvel Captain America guy, there's very few segmented things. You can be a fan of the comics, be a fan of the movies. I'm sure they exist, but there's somebody out there who's a fan of the 70s movies. I grew up watching the 90s Captain America movie and loved that. But my point is, with He-Man, everything in Sonic, too, everything's so segmented, you get almost like internal brawls within the fandom of like, no, the cartoon was better. No, the reboot cartoon was better. No, this was better. No, and it's can get frustrated when you have multiple versions of continuity for one franchise. At least when you have that problem with the DC comic books, where there's multiple versions of continuity, they're not publishing congruently. So it's like I could be a fan of the Golden Age Superman, but they're not publishing any new Golden Age Superman, So it can get frustrating just on a fandom level that, He-Man is a segmented property. Because let's be fair, if they're going to reboot He-Man, I know they tried a few years ago and it didn't go too well. But if they were going to try a reboot He-Man, you would have to look and go, do we base the new property off of the comics, off of the original cartoon, off of the Dolph Lundgren movie? What sources do we pull from for the reboot? And the thing is, no matter what choice you make, you're going to offend a portion of the audience who preferred X, Y, or Z over whatever source they pulled from. And so it's a shame. It's a shame that when they were constructing the He-Man universe, they didn't take, the comic books and TV show were designed to do one thing, and that was to sell toys for, I think, Kenner, I think it was Kenner. But they were just designed to sell toys. There's a great interview with Paul Dini, who worked on the animated series. And when they came to him with, it's going to be called He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, he said in a production meeting, okay, who are the Masters of the Universe? And they didn't have an answer. They just had a cool title, and that's what it was going to be called. You can find that interview in one of the earlier Kevin Smith Fat Man on Batman podcasts. It's a good listen. I recommend you go back and find that one. So there's a problem with just all the supplementary materials were created solely to sell toys. And when the toy line dried up, that was it. He-Man went away. And I grew up with the Dolph Lundgren He-Man movie. And that was my He-Man. I enjoyed that interpretation. I didn't see anything wrong with that. I must have watched the movie as a kid, I don't know, a couple hundred times. I'm sure I wore out a VHS copy of He-Man. But I didn't have the toys. A friend of mine had the He-Man castle and a bunch of the He-Man figures. So I'd go over to his house and I'd play with his He-Man figures. But I didn't... He-Man, to me, was more the movie. It was more Dolph Lundgren. And I know that's not the preferred interpretation of the character. Now, one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about He-Man, other than talking about the segmented fandom, is recently I posted a He-Man meme. You might have seen it. It's kind of a funny little gag where on the left is a picture of Barbie, and it talks about all the negative depictions of how young girls can have self-esteem issues from playing with Barbies. And then on the right is a picture of a buffed out He-Man, and it says, "This is He-Man." It's meant to be humorous. It's a gag. I know if you have to explain the joke, it's not funny. But I recently posted this meme, and a friend of mine was kind of taken aback. And she had every right to be taken aback, and she seemed very defensive towards She-Ra and He-Man. And just talking to her about She-Ra and He-Man, I had a realization. When you look at the Saturday morning cartoons of the late 80s, early 90s, my Saturday morning era, there isn't very many female-led cartoons. You don't have many cartoons where you have a strong female character as the lead of the show. There are a few that pop up, but they're definitely not the leads. Like even in the Super Friends cartoon, Wonder Woman is part of an ensemble cast. She's not the lead. We've never even gotten a Saturday morning Wonder Woman cartoon. But when you look at all the other cartoons of the era, the few times where you do get female-led Saturday morning cartoons. And if there's any I'm forgetting, please write in the comments. Let me know. But the three that come to my mind are Josie and the Pussycats, Jem and the Holograms, and then you get She-Ra. She-Ra kind of stands out because, no offense to Josie and the Pussycats and Jem, they're kind of situation comedies about bands who get into unique situations. I know Jem was played a little bit more serious with they had rivals and whatnot, and Jem will be a whole other episode onto itself. And when it comes to Josie and the Pussycats, I was a bigger fan of the later years with Josie and the Pussycats in Space, where they had Captain Caveman as their manager. Mostly because I'm a Captain Caveman fan. But I still enjoyed Josie and the Pussycats. But She-Ra, to my recollection, is the first Saturday morning female superhero. We have a lot of, like I said, strong female characters in other cartoons that can't be denied. But She-Ra got her spin-off series from He-Man and is the first like straight up female superhero of Saturday morning cartoons. That is kind of impressive. That predates any kind of like Wonder Woman, any kind of, I know right now DC has their superhero girls line, but this was in the 80s, and She-Ra became kind of, I don't want to call her a feminist icon, but I think that's really important that, in the 80s when diversity wasn't being pushed, when it was okay to do a cartoon of everyone being the same, She-Ra is brought in to be the strong female character in He-Man. And I think she's probably a better character than He-Man. She's definitely more well-rounded. She doesn't have some of the same identity hang-ups that He-Man has. It's not the most feminist of characters, but it's a good stepping stone, especially for the 80s. I don't remember, because I don't think She-Ra had to keep her identity secret, but she did. She was in fact Princess Adora. Yeah, Adora. I don't recall if I don't think she had the whole Prince Adam secret identity thing. I could be wrong. Just off of memory, I don't think so. She is Prince Adam's twin sister. Again, it was a spin-off. I think the script could have had one more pass. But again, this stuff was created by Funimation or Filmation to sell toys. That's what its main goal was to sell figures. And the fact that it attempted to even be kind of something resembling strong female driven thing with the spin-off is pretty impressive. Now, I know a lot of people say gay undertones, but I never saw that as a kid. I think there's an argument to be made, but even the Dolph Lundgren film, super masculine, He-Man, kicking butt and taking names. I never saw anything as a kid that made me question his identity. Not that they would ever go that deep in the 80s in a Saturday morning cartoon. But there's an argument to be made. Either undertones or whatnot. She-Ra, I think, is a character that should be remembered more. Again, in the fictional world of Saturday morning cartoons, she really was one of the first strong, feminine, characters. Like, we don't get that many. Like, there are strong female characters in cartoons, but like they're relegated to, like, in SWAT Cats, the secretary role or part of an ensemble cast. She-Ra had her own villain, her own Hordak. She had her own thing going on separate from He-Man, even though she was a He-Man spinoff. And I think that says something. I think that says something very prominent about the character. That she didn't need for them to cross over. I think they crossed over once in the film and then once again in the Christmas special, which is pretty weird. Like, there's orphans and kids. I think Santa Claus is involved. It's been a while since I've seen it. It doesn't hold up. But again, like, this is a fun universe, and it's a fun thing to. Sorry, I just looked it up. Mattel was the guys who made He-Man, Masters of the Universe, or at least the toy line. And I apologize for saying it was Kenner. But He-Man was kind of this figure of my childhood. And that's kind of why I wanted to talk about him. And, the Dolph Lundgren film was one of the first, like, action things I ever got to see. And, it was just, he's a fun character. He's, the toy line, was ridiculous and goofy and none of the characters made sense. And the show was trying to make sense of something that was designed not to make sense. And then you get a movie that's taking nonsense way too seriously. It's just fun. And then on top of it, you get things like She-Ra, where they tried to be somewhat feminist in the midst of this just ridiculous universe. And I love that. There's a term Adam West created to describe the 1966 Batman series called Theater of the Absurd. And I think that's what comic books do best, is just theater of the absurd. If you want a guy punching a dinosaur, we will draw a guy punching a dinosaur, and you will go with it because it's absurd and fun. And I think that's one of the things He-Man does right, is it's, You have the secret identity of Prince Adam. You have Skeletor. You have all this absurd, well, that stuff's pretty fun. But then when you get into like the absurd characters and the many faces and the guy with the spinning face and all that kind of stuff, it's just fun. And I think that's what makes this franchise stick around and why it's still with us. I can't speak for everybody, but I know at least, every so often as a child, I would, by the power of Grayskull, you just yell that out. Even as an adult, I've yelled it out on one or two occasions because it's fun. And I think that's why He-Man is stuck in with us. And I think that's, why I kind of wanted to talk about He-Man on this first episode is, he's fun. The Saturday morning cartoons were fun. You'd get up, God knows how early, and just you'd get to binge watch. Like, we were binge watching before binge watching was the thing. 5 hours Saturday morning cartoons, boom, let's do this. He-Man, Flintstones, we didn't care. That was Saturday mornings. And so that's kind of what I want to do with this show is talk about some of the Saturday morning characters. And I've already recorded several art things, so I know He-Man went a little longer than most. On average, these things are going to be about 10 to 15 minutes. He-Man's clocking in at around 40 minutes. But I did a little bit more than, like art-wise. This is how if you were to come up to me at a con and ask for a He-Man sketch, this is kind of what you would get. Maybe I might do a different pose, but you get, a strong hero pose from either He-Man or She-Ra. And I wanted to do them both because I think they're fun. I think they're, it's a little weird that they're twins that look, in my opinion, nothing alike. And they both happen to have similar magical swords. I forget what She-Ra would say during the transformation. I don't believe it was by the power of Grayskull. Which always was a little weird to me, because, again, the universe never made sense. So He-Man, by the power of Grayskull! The villain is Skeletor, who is a living skull. I always thought there was a connection there as a kid, but I've never found it. If there is some sort of lore linking the magical sword to Skeletor, please fill me in the comments below, because maybe I just didn't watch the right episodes. Now, I do want to say the whole point of this show, this YouTube thing, is because I've done these sketches before, and I was just doing them like I would draw them, and then I'd speed up the video. But like I said, I'm changing format. I want to go to once a week, and not every episode's going to be this long. I'm going to publish them every Thursday at noon. And each episode we're going to be talking about a different character. We're going to be talking about, Foghorn Leghorn. We're going to be talking about some of the Looney Tunes guys. We're going to talk about some of the Disney characters. We're going to talk about different Saturday morning cartoon characters from our youth. I thought He-Man was a great way to start this, mostly because I had recently had a conversation with a friend about He-Man, and it got oddly deep. And I thought, wow, there is something more and profound to this character. Because he is a deep character. Like, it's weird. Again, this is the kind of thing I would do at a convention. Like, if you came up to me, and at my booth, I have a bunch of pre-done sketches, just my warm-up sketches. I sell them for, I think, $5 a pop. But if you came up to me and said, I want a He-Man sketch, this is what I would do. I do pencil, and I'm using the same tools I use on the go at the conventions. I use 0.5 pencil, the mechanical pencil, fine point Sharpie marker, and then I use a brush. It's like $8 at any craft store. It's just has water on the inside, and I squirt that out onto a cheap $5 watercolor set that I travel with. And so I do everything in watercolor, mostly because I can get things done faster. I like the water texture, the paint, and it separates, say, my art from somebody's using the Copic markers or whatever. So yeah, I do a lot of watercolor stuff at conventions. Also, it's just really easy to just pick up and go. I don't have to deal with all the markers and whatnot. But like I said, this is kind of how the show's going to work from now on. Is a basic, like this would be what I would do at a con sketch. If you came up to me and went, I want a Hong Kong Phooey sketch. First off, I would say, God bless you for wanting a Hong Kong Phooey sketch, and I would gladly do a Hong Kong Phooey sketch. I have in the past done a couple of different DuckTales characters, and a lovely lady at one convention asked me to do a Mega Man sketch. And this is kind of what I do at cons, besides selling my own books. I draw a kid's book called Mr. Cuddles. It's about an angelically possessed teddy bear who's protecting their family against zombies, vampires, babysitters, the scourges of the universe. And it's all done in watercolor. That's, kind of the way I prefer it. I enjoy the muddier kind of coloring that you see in like Dark Knight Returns. And so that's what I've gravitated to as a cartoonist. These are kind of like basically I'm just doing a con sketch. Just real quick in my office, and then I'm going to spend the time talking about these characters and why they're important to me and how I met them and where they first came into my life. And He-Man is one of those characters who's always been a part of my life. He's, one of my earliest memories is watching the Dolph Lundgren film and then going over to my friend Troy's house, who had the Gray Skull Castle and had, several of the He-Man figures. And we didn't care that G.I. Joe and He-Man didn't mesh. We just let our imaginations go wild. Although I think I was bothered by the mixing of genres, I don't think he was. I'll have to ask him about that someday, because I'm still friends with my buddy Troy. And that's just a good hunk of my childhood is He-Man. Even though I didn't own the Gray Skull Castle, I can honestly say that He-Man was a big part of my childhood. Especially that Dolph Lundgren film, which I know a lot of people don't like, but I will defend it to my last dying breath because it's awesome. and you get like a weird like back alley brawl between He-Man and three of his, rogues gallery. And I just think that's fun. Like that back alley brawl and everything that went into that movie. I don't believe it was financially successful, but it was a good part of my childhood, and God bless them for making it. And so I just want to say thank you for watching. I know I rambled on a bit in this episode. It was fairly long, and I apologize, but this was a longer sketch, and I kind of wanted to get things right, and I wanted to talk about He-Man. But I should have taken the time to do a little bit more research before doing the audio. I don't want to copy Geek History Lesson verbatim because they do all the research. I just want to sit down and I want to talk about Saturday morning cartoons. And that's going to be the format for the next year, is we're just going to talk about cartoons. So thank you, and hopefully I'll see you next Thursday. And please like, subscribe, spread the word. If you want to support me, go to my website. Please buy a book.